This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
So, KPLC TV is a news organization. It's a news channel down in the Lake Charles area, but they covered quite a bit of the stories of the Jeff Davis 8. I'm going to put a link into the show notes where people can go and look at these people that are talking and some of the clips I'm using. And I'm going to use a couple of their clips now and a little later. I think I'm going to use them once later. But the bottom line is, with the Jeff Davis 8, there is a lot of resources that sort of get gathered and squandered. And I still think it's tied to some type of law enforcement inefficiency or inadequacy. But there's so many agencies involved, it's complicated to say it that way.
The following program is for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Drugs, sex, and 8 unsolved deaths.
There ain't a day that goes by I don't think of her.
8 women from Jeff Davis Parish left dead and dumped. All were part of a dangerous culture of drugs and sex.
Men pick me up on the streets, and I go and I handle, sexual favors for money or drugs.
A large investigation was launched to solve the mystery, but still no answers, just mounting frustration among some in the community.
There's no public confidence. When you go around town and you ask the people around here, they have no confidence in the task force or the sheriff's department.
And what about this man called a person of interest by investigators?
Did you take a polygraph test?
Yes, I have.
How'd you do on it?
I'm still on the street.
How long will this mystery remain unsolved? Good evening, I'm Cynthia Arsenault in downtown Jennings. Tonight we're going to delve deeper into this mystery. We'll explore the so-called high-risk lifestyle the victims led and take a close look at the sometimes controversial investigation into these deaths. The mystery all began back in 2005 when the first body was discovered. KPLC's Teresa Schmidt has this part of the story.
A fisherman made the first gruesome discovery May 20th, 2005, in a canal off Highway 1126. The victim is 28-year-old Loretta Chesson Lewis, last seen alive 3 days earlier. Her body was too decomposed to determine a cause of death, but authorities say drugs and a high level of alcohol are in her system. Less than a month later, victim 2. The partially nude body of Ernestine Daniels Patterson is found in a canal off Highway 102, June 18, 2005, 2 days after she disappeared. Authorities say her throat was cut. In 2006, 2 men were arrested and indicted in connection with Patterson's death, but charges against Byron Chad Jones and Lawrence Nixon are dismissed. The official reason, a lack of evidence and unreliable witnesses. A year and 9 months later, the nude body of victim 3, Kristen Gary Lopez, is discovered by a fisherman in a canal off Highway 99. Again, the body is too decomposed to determine a cause of death, but drugs were found in her system. Lopez is the cousin of 17-year-old Brittany Gary, who would later die. Victim 4 is Whitney Dubois, found nearly 2 months later, May 12, 2007. Her nude body is found dumped on a rural road. The body is too decomposed to determine the cause of death. They used her fingerprints to identify her. Her grief-stricken brother, Mike Dubois, said then his little sister was a lost soul.
He was in the drug world, bad.
We tried helping her. We tried getting her help.
Soon after Whitney's death, Frankie Richard and his niece are arrested. Frankie was named as a person of interest because he had contact with 3 of the women before their deaths. Both Richard and his niece go free after a witness recants her story. Then on May 29, 2008, a police officer finds 23-year-old Laconia Muggy Brown. Her throat had been cut. Then on September 11, 2008, hunters find the body of victim 6 in a dry irrigation canal. Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno had been asphyxiated. Scarcely 2 months later, victim 7, 17-year-old Brittany Gary, is last seen on surveillance video at his store. Her mother, Teresa Gary, pleads for anyone with information to come forward.
So I'm asking anyone out there, if you have seen Brittany, please, I'm begging you, please call me.
Family and friends search for Brittany. It ends on November 15, 2008. Brittany's body is found in a field off Highway 1126. It's a homicide with the cause of death ruled asphyxia and mixed drug intoxication. Finally, August 19, 2009, off Interstate 10 in Acadia Parish, the body of victim 8, Nicole Guillory, is found just 2 weeks before her 27th birthday. It's ruled a homicide caused by asphyxiation. It's an eerie coincidence that surveillance video shot by a private eye investigating the deaths captured images of Guillory just before she would become a victim. Guillory is seen in an area frequented by many of the women. While autopsies did not conclude all deaths were homicides, the sheriff says investigators are treating them as such. While Sheriff Ricky Edwards says all along they've sought help and used resources from other agencies, in late 2008 a multi-agency investigative team or task force was made official.
We follow every lead. We have the resources from the FBI. We have resources from the state police. In addition to the FBI, we have their behavioral analysis unit. So we have resources that are available to us from all walks of life.
Edwards says 14 local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies are working together to bring those responsible to justice. We'll have more on Frankie Richard, the man named as a person of interest back in 2007, and the woman whose statement led to his arrest and why she says she lied.
Thanks, Teresa. You know, this dark cloud that hangs over Jeff Davis Parish is all that people are talking about. But how many of us really know the young women? How many of us know about the tragedy that their families are feeling? We sat down with family members of all of the victims to get a closer look at the lives behind the headlines.
Oh, I wake up with her on my mind. I go to bed with her on my mind. It's my life. I mean, she's gone now. I have no closure.
Melissa Gary deals with the heartache and pain one day at a time. Her daughter was 21-year-old Kristen Gary Lopez, a young woman who, as a little girl growing up, was no different than any other.
She was a loving child. She was my baby.
But trouble began early on. Kristen dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and things just weren't right.
He tried to talk to her, and we all did. I mean, I did, my family, her dad, his family, her godparents. I mean, she would listen for a little while, but when I guess she got that urge.
Drugs were a very real part of Kristen's life. All of the young women's lives, and they all moved in the same circles to get those drugs. In fact, they knew each other, so Kristen herself was called in when the first victim, Loretta Chesson, was found.
When they found Loretta, they called, I remember if it was the same day or the next day, for them to interview Kristen. We were living in Welch, and I had to bring Kristen to them talk. You could tell she was scared, but she never would tell me anything because I've asked her. Knew is there something bothering, but she just never would tell me.
An uneasy feeling that her daughter was keeping something inside. But if she was, she would take it to the grave. Oddly enough, family members of other victims tell similar stories.
She would always tell us that, that she wouldn't wouldn't live long, her, and she knew that, wouldn't tell us nothing, but she knew.
26-year-old Nicole Guillory, the latest victim found this past August. Nicole was the mother of 4 children, the youngest who just turned 1. Her mother, Barbara, admits life wasn't easy for Nicole. Nicole dropped out of school in the 7th grade.
The family life, we were not together with her daddy. We were apart more than anything. And she, I guess, took that hard. She had trouble, I guess, accepting it.
But in spite of it all, her sister Jessica expresses hope.
They might have took Nicole, but they did not take the memories. They did not take her spiritually away. She's still here. I feel her. It's like I can hear her stomping down the hall sometimes. They couldn't, no matter how much they try, they can never take that away.
Who was Ernestine Daniels Patterson? Her younger sister Jessica remembers a happier time for her family.
It was funny, very respectable. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. She helped people. They need help.
But drugs managed to creep into Ernestine's life as well. She was a mother of 4 who her parents say really loved her children, but a downward spiral had begun.
Cut her throat. I don't think she deserved that, because that's not right in God's sight. And that hurts a lot. I can't rest at night. It hurts a lot. It bothers me. It hurts.
There was definitely danger all around Ernestine. Jessica recalls what happened one night when she and her sister were walking home and strange men drove up offering a ride and drugs.
You want some crack? Y'all want some weed? Y'all ain't nothing but some bees. Y'all ain't nothing but some hoes.
They escaped danger that night, but Ernestine's sister says she'll never forget it.
He said he's going to catch one of us and kill us. And I came home, I told my mom and them, called the police told me I really can't do nothing because, I really didn't have a name. I didn't have his name, but I seen his face, and I still remember that man's face from the day. I remember the car, everything. He had black gloves on, white shirt, pants, boots, a beard, bald head with blue eyes.
Unfortunately for the Daniels, they haven't seen their 4 grandchildren since Ernestine's death over 4 years ago. So their only memory of Ernestine are her ashes that they cling to in this tiny black box.
They found another body, and the description matches Whitney, and she told me, you need to get here right now.
It's May of 2007. 3 bodies have already been found over the course of just 2 years. And the day before Mother's Day, 26-year-old Whitney Dubois is found. Whitney and her biological sister Taylor were adopted by the Dubois family. Her adopted brother Mike says Whitney was with them as a baby.
Even though she was adopted, we had more of a blood brother and sister relationship, and like I said, I raised her partially as my daughter for a long time.
Whitney was found the day before Mother's Day. Her 5-year-old daughter Beyonce had made her a Mother's Day card at school, not knowing her mother would never get to read it.
She brought the card to the funeral home, and she read the card in front of the people in the funeral home, and she cried. She put the cord on top of the casket and she ran out of the funeral home.
But the family is determined to make sure the little girl will have a good life. They try to shelter her from all the talk and rumors, but know that it will be hard.
I feel like my sister fell victim to the streets, which a lot of people do. And her addiction was a problem that she became weak to and she couldn't fight. But I want to still be able to hold my head up high and be proud that Whitney was my sister. We put our T-shirts on, and we're glad that we wear our sister's name on our back. It doesn't make a difference to us. It shouldn't make a difference to anybody else. At the end of the day, somebody out there killed these women, and, when you have to look into their children's eyes every day and see the hurt and pain that it's caused, it changes your perception.
62-year-old Bessie Brown has to look into this little boy's eyes every day. He's her great-grandson, 4-year-old Jaheem. His mother, Laconia Muggy Brown, became victim number 5.
He grabbed a vase, a white vase, and he said, Mimi, this is for Muggy. We gonna put it on Muggy grave. And he got down in the graveyard, he kissed her. He said, I love you, Muggy.
It was hard to believe. It was hard to believe because it's like you just seen her hit today and she was gone the next day.
Muggy's sister Kendra remembers her as protective and nurturing.
She would very like to encourage us not to be down. She always wanted us to be happy, keep going, never give up.
She has strong feelings about how the Jeff Davis 8 are portrayed. The drugs, sex, and the dark life are very real, but the victims are still just that, victims.
It don't make nobody a bad person if they go hang on Main Street. And I don't know why they saying that, okay, if you hang on Main Street, you're a bad person. No, you're not a bad person. You can be loving, you can still be caring, but you're not a bad person because you're hanging on Main Street.
In the meantime, life seems to have come full circle for Miss Bessie. She raised Muggy all her life, and now she's left to raise Muggy's son.
If he would ask me where his mother, I said, well, did his God took her, but one day you will see her again. Yes, ma'am.
How much heartache can one community stand? Less than 4 months after Muggy's death, another family goes through the same deep sorrow.
I thought that it could happen to her, and we talked about it often. Crystal and I talked about it often also. And she always said, I knew her, you know, we know she knew Kristen, we know she knew Loretta, and she said she knew Ernestine, she knew Muggy, and it kept going, and she's like, well, what if I'm next? She always said, what if I'm next? And I'm like, just don't put yourself in that situation and you won't be next.
But Crystal Shea Benoit was next. Crystal and Nicole Guillory hug as little girls in this picture. Who would have known they would suffer the same fate?
We had a quiet family, actually. It was a family. We had Grandma and Papa and everything else.
But then came bipolar disorder.
She was diagnosed with bipolar at the age of 12, and, you know, she always loved everyone else but herself.
The family went through years of struggle with Crystal being in and out of homes and treatment facilities. She ran away at 15 and was missing for 3 years.
The last time I spoke with Crystal, she was at the hospital. She said, well, what happens if I'm not here next week? She said, what if I am the next one murdered? And she was.
17-year-old Brittany Gary was the youngest of the victims. That last image of her walking to the store buying minutes for her cell phone will forever be etched on our minds. For the last 2 years of her life, Brittany lived with Sarah Louvier and her daughter Heidi.
She was a beautiful child, she was.
Sarah says Brittany and her siblings were just typical children, but things started to change when their mother and father split up.
They lived in the country. You know, they was never in town. You know, they were some country kids. You know, they didn't know what the streets were. They didn't know what the streets were. And whenever they got thrown out there on the streets, they had to learn the street. She was a child. You know, she didn't deserve this at all.
You've heard so much about these women and the high-risk lifestyle, but what does that mean? KPLC's Lee Peck spent several nights on the streets of Jennings to find out. You'll see what he discovered next.
So, with the Jefferson Davis 8, there are 8 main victims, and it's sort of complicated to sort out. It can be complicated to sort out like how they're all related, but one of the things that I don't think happens, they sort of gloss over the dates and times in their names. Like they get lumped into this Jeff Davis 8 thing. So I wanted to go through, and I just wanted to talk briefly about each individual date and time that they were found and estimated to have died. Because there's not a lot of other information of them out there that isn't tied back to Ethan Brown's theory. The first victim is Loretta Chasson, or Loretta Lewis, depending on what you're reading. Her date of death was estimated to have been May 17th of 2005, and she was found on Friday, May 20th, 2005. Her body was found off of Highway 1126 it's right by the Grand Marais Canal. Is that how you say that? Marais?
I think so.
She was wearing blue jeans, blue panties, and a short sleeve white pullover blouse.
Okay,
now,
so she had clothes on.
Yes, she was clothed. And the findings for her death were she was an undetermined manner of death. She was definitely having some level of mixed drug intoxication, and they list that out underneath. There was the presence of blood, it says under the scalp, and that there was no evidence of significant injuries or natural disease. For drugs, the toxicology report indicates that she had a 0.16 alcohol. But what you have to remember about alcohol levels in a dead body, they can be slightly misleading once decomp starts. She had cocaine in her system. She had Zoloft and she had Celexa. Zoloft and Celexa were, at the time, they would have been very popular drugs for dealing with depression or other mental health situations. So she's the first victim. And again, there's no real signs of violence related to her. It's very difficult to tell the difference between what happened post-mortem and what might have been the cause of death. So they have her listed as an undetermined manner of death. The second victim is Ernestine Patterson. Her date of death was estimated to be June 16th of 2005, and her body was found on Friday, June 18th, 2005. And the location of the body was off a canal at Highway 102. This is the Aguillard, Aguillard canal. She was wearing blue jean shorts. Now, she was considered to be a homicide. She had 3 incised wounds to her neck. There were 3 cuts across the front of the neck. There were bruises on her left hand, and there were a variety of post-mortem injuries. But there were no... that was thought to be fish, marine predators. The post-mortem injuries were. No evidence of other significant injuries or natural disease. Now, she had a blood alcohol level that was about half of Loretta. It was 0.08, and she had cocaine in her system. So right there, we have a couple of things that potentially could link the toxicology in these cases. Not super interesting overall.
But we've got Ernestine Patterson was found just short of a month after Loretta Chasson Lewis was found. They were both at least partially clothed, and they were both in water. Right. Ernestine was in more of like a drainage canal, and Loretta was like right off of a bridge. So those are the similarities there. And so as far as time goes, it's not quite a month difference. But Ernestine, her throat was slashed. I'm not sure that they would have been able to tell if Loretta's throat was slashed, even if it was. But there was no indication any deeper that there were any injuries. I always felt like the blood under the scalp was probably more likely from her, like the fall into the water, or like, right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I tended to agree with that. Either the fall or immediately preceding the fall, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like there was something related to that where they didn't observe any additional fractures or bruising. So I was like, not a lot I can do with that. And then the third victim is a long time later, actually. This is Kristen Gary Lopez. Kristen Gary Lopez's date of death is estimated to be around March 6th of 2007, and her body was found on Sunday, March 18th, 2007, off of Highway 99 and the Pettigene Canal. She had a white sock on her right foot with red hearts on it, and she had a yellow metal ring on her finger. Her manner of death was undetermined, but she had extensive post-mortem injuries interfering with that because of, again, marine predators, basically anything in the water that was nipping on her. There was no evidence of significant injuries or natural disease. She did have a blood alcohol level of 0.06. There was cocaine in her system, and she was found to have taken the drug Soma, which is a muscle relaxer. But again,
She had no clothes on.
She had a sock on, but no clothes.
She had a sock, but her body, for the most part, was naked.
Right.
Which is a substantial difference. And so, just to sort of reiterate here, we've got Loretta in May of 2005, and then Ernestine in June of 2005, and then Kristen is March of 2007.
Right.
So that's a substantial amount of time difference. She did have drugs in her system, but unlike the first two, she's practically completely naked, but for a sock.
The victim after Kristen, the fourth of the Jefferson Davis 8, is Whitney Dubois. And Whitney was estimated to have died on May 11th of 2007. She was found on Saturday, May 12th, 2007, which is the following day. She was found near the intersection of Earl Duhan and Bobby Roads. She was on the road, and this is down near some crayfish or crawfish ponds.
Maybe she was in the middle of a dirt road.
Correct.
So this is May 2007. We're talking about 2 months after Kristen Elizabeth Gary Lopez, after she was found about 2 months later. And she had no clothes on. Whitney has no clothes on. And she's not in the water. So she's the first one not in the water.
With Whitney, she had an undetermined manner of death, but she did have mixed drug intoxication. She had some nonspecific bruises on her left and right lower extremities. There were no evidence of significant injuries or natural disease. Found on the body were brown elastic bands and white elastic bands on her right wrist, and there was an earring found on the ground at the crime scene. Her toxicology came back weird because you got to remember this had only been 24 hours. Her blood alcohol was 0.42. So, to give you an idea of what we're referencing there, when you get pulled over for drunk driving, the key that they're looking for, depending on the state that you're in, is 0.08-ish is where they start to consider you to be impaired. So hers was 0.42. And that is
a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, that's a significant difference.
It's 5 times the legal limit, so to speak.
Yeah, and in her system, in addition to that alcohol, she also had cocaine and Xanax.
So what do you think about that?
About the alcohol part?
Well, about all of it. About the fact that she was in the middle of the road and that she had I don't know, actually. I don't know, can you tell me what a person with 0.4 something alcohol in their system, what are they going to be doing?
Not much.
Sleeping? Hopefully staying alive?
0.4 alcohol. Well, so how much do you know about that stuff? Because I will explain it. I don't want to seem...
I don't know anything about it really because I know that 0.08 is the legal driving limit, but I couldn't tell you if somebody was...
Okay, so this is the breakdown on that to give you an idea. I'm going to start low and go high. And you can find this, you can just look online for blood alcohol concentrations, which is the BAC. It's slightly different than what these are. These are ethanol concentrations. The difference here being that bodies that are decomposing can produce ethanol. Go ahead.
But it's not a lot of it, though. I think that the decomposing body, when it makes a difference, when it's either they had alcohol or they didn't, I think the decomposition comes into play. But that's mainly to establish they didn't have alcohol, and the only reason it's showing up is because they were they had began the process of breaking down. I don't know that that's necessarily relevant in these cases, but so I do want you to explain it. But the reason I was asking was like I'm leading up to like, you know, what a person's doing when they've got a 0.46, I think is what you said, and how, you know, they might end up in the middle of the road.
A 0.02 is the lowest level that could be considered intoxication with measurable impact on a person. And that's the brain, the body, everything. You're going to feel relaxed. You're going to experience potentially a slightly altered mood or state of mind. And your body temperature is going to elevate just a little bit. And even at a 0.02, alcohol could potentially affect your judgment. I say that because it really depends on other factors related to your size, your body mass, your tolerance. 0.05% is sort of the next measurable level. At this level, your blood alcohol is important because this is sort of the cutoff point where you could have some problems. Your behavior is going to be exaggerated. You may be louder, and that's probably the idea that someone is louder and gestures more than they normally would is where this kicks in, 0.05.
And that's before like the legal driving limit. That's
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. So some of your small muscles can begin to have a delay or a loss of control. Like you could have trouble focusing your eyes here. Your judgment could potentially be impaired and your coordination could be reduced. Tracking objects visually becomes more difficult, and that's why some of the tests that you get involve, like the different, I can't think of the name of that test where they're holding
It's
the
the
pen.
field sobriety test.
Yeah, but there's a specific thing. I thought it. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Whatever. There's different tests. Yes, they're field sobriety tests. They are essentially testing your body's reaction. They don't really care about what you're saying. Although what you're saying can get you in trouble, they're really looking to see like how your eyes and nose and your balance
The things
affected.
that you can't really control if you are drunk.
Right. And that's why they'll check you for because tracking objects will become more difficult the drunker you get. Your ability to respond to emergencies and your reaction times are impaired at 0.05. They'll be reduced, a little bit from what you normally would be. Your inhibitions can be lowered, and you might engage in risky behaviors you normally would not engage in at 0.05. 0.08 is the legal limit currently in most of the U.S. states. I think it's like 48 states or 47 states, and I don't know what it is in the others, so I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go look. This level is considered illegal. It's considered unsafe to drive. You lose coordination. You can lose or have delayed reactions with your balance, your speech. Even your hearing gets a little worse at this point in time. You're going to have trouble standing still, focusing on objects, and you're not going to be able to evade obstacles. This is where people stumble. You could have a serious problem driving. Your reasoning, your judgment, your self-control, and your concentration, they're all going to be impaired at this point. And beyond this point, your memory is going to start to be impaired. Some of your short-term memory loss can begin at as low as 0.08 to 0.10. 0.10 is the next measurable level. Your reaction time and your control is seriously reduced. Your speech will be slurred, potentially. Your thinking and your reasoning are slower, and you're going to have trouble coordinating your arms and legs at this point. When you get to a 0.15, this blood alcohol concentration for operators of heavy equipment and motor vehicles is considered very high. You're going to have less control over your body. You're going to have trouble with your balance, and your voluntary muscles that you're used to using are potentially going to be impaired at this point. Walking and talking can be difficult. You can fall and hurt yourself. And about 0.15 to 0.18 is where people begin to experience the feeling of their body rejecting alcohol, and that is when you start to see people throw up. So the next level starts to get to where it's just in increments of 10. If you hit a 0.2 up until a 0.29, you're going to be feeling what's known as stupor. You're going to be feeling confusion. This is where you would be disoriented in general. You might feel what would be people might describe as dazed. Standing and walking at a point in the 0.25 to 0.29, you're going to start to need some help. This is where you're going to have to start to help your friends stagger back to their dorm room. Your balance and your muscle control are not what they were earlier in the evening. They've deteriorated quite a bit. Your pain sensations are going to change. So you can fall or have an accident in a vehicle. You can seriously hurt yourself, and you may not realize that you need to respond to that. You may not realize that you're hurt. At this point, most people are going to have their body reject the idea of that they're this impaired. And it's going to do that a number of ways. You could have to go to the bathroom. You could get sick. You could have trouble with your gag reflex, which is where this is going to be where people could potentially aspirate or choke. And this is also where some people's body response to this is your body just shuts down and you black out. Now, it could be that you black out and you're walking around, or it could be that you black out and pass out. When you get to 0.30 to 0.39, the next 10-point scale, so to speak, at this point, you're unconscious. Most people are unconscious. The majority of people are unconscious. This is where you get into dangerous territory where your body can't control things to the point that your potential for death has drastically increased. With a loss of understanding here, like it's hard to qualify what a loss of understanding here is, but if you're at this point, you're probably blacked out walking around. And it could be that you're interacting with people, but you don't know that you were interacting with people. That's what a loss of understanding is. You're going to experience some serious shit at this point. Your breathing is going to have trouble. That's like one of the first big signs. Your heartbeat is probably going to be irregular to some degree. It's probably going to be spiking high. And this is where you pee yourself. That's the fun part about being 0.30 to 0.39% BAC drunk. You're going to pee yourself. And people say you don't, well, you may not, but you are going to pee wherever you are. And that means different things for different people. But like, you're going to find yourself peeing on sidewalks and peeing on trees and in potted plants. Once you're to this point, like, this is the point where people are like, now you're going to be memorable, and it's not going to be good. So there's really only, once you get to 0.39, there's only one last place to go, and that is 0.40. Some people just continue with what they're experiencing at 0.39, and depending on how you're consuming the alcohol, you're going to start fluctuating. I mean, you're not going to be good for like hours. But, and some people, once you hit a certain level, you're going to be drunk for, like, you're going to feel drunk for 2 days. Once you get over 0.39, you're just in this area that, like, they stop qualifying it, really. This is coma area. If you go over a 0.40, you move into territory where there's a strong possibility that your heart and your breathing can suddenly stop. And you could either end up passed out, blacked out, in a coma, or if your body is not responding the way that those people's are, you could die. You can have sudden death when you hit 0.40. And I know I'm sort of wandering off track there, but just to remind you, Whitney Dubois had a 0.42 ethanol level.
So her family said, I believe it's her niece who is like about her age. She was adopted, and so her brothers, who was substantially older than her, his daughter, said, well, they found that really strange because Whitney didn't drink. She preferred to smoke pot over consuming alcohol. And I believe them. I mean, I believe it was her niece and then her sister maybe that were saying this. But, a little bit of that could be attributed to the decomp. It's really hard to imagine where the rest of that alcohol came from if she didn't consume it somehow. Because I would imagine alcohol is one of the hardest things to slip to someone because you literally have to funnel it into them. I'm not sure like how that could be an issue. Do you have any ideas about that?
There was some stuff that I sort of experimented with relation to this. The idea of getting to a 0.40. I don't have this in front of me. Do you know how much she weighed? It's like the autopsy report is sort of strange here. It's the section that I can read, and I went to read Ethan Brown's version. It's not clear on her height and weight. It has some of the other people's height and weight, but it does not have Whitney's right where I can get to it. But I'll say this. To get to a 0.4, it's actually weirdly different for men and women, and depending on weight. And this is just body makeup. That's all it says, body makeup and body chemistry.
101 pounds. She was 5'3" and weighed 101 pounds.
Okay, so where she's at that point is, and this is crazy. Your body can get rid of about a drink an hour. That's sort of the idea. Now, one drink is it's a little pourer full of liquor, so it's about 1.5 ounces of, like, say, 40% alcohol or 80 proof. It could be 12 ounces of beer or 5 ounces of table wine, depending on the ABV, or the alcohol content of what you're drinking. But for someone who's 100 pounds, it's about 9 to 10 drinks that are significant. And I'll just go ahead and say that, like, most people drinking in a bar, it's 9 to 10 drinks. If you're drinking like Shine, or somebody's pouring you heavier proof liquors or heavier amounts of liquor where they're pouring doubles or triples, you can get to a 0.4 pretty quickly, but it's got to happen. Like, your 9 drinks in an hour is weird. Like, I have times where I'm celebrating and I know I don't have to drive and I don't have the responsibility of the kid and all these things are going on, where I'll go have a couple of beers. The thing about that is, first of all, me at my weight, 9 beers or 9 liquor drinks of like that a bartender would serve, it would take, I would have to consume 9 of them in an hour to get to a 0.14. That is drastically different for someone who is 100 pounds. And I say this because I can't imagine a scenario, unless she's doing like a moonshine drink. Like, if somebody has given her like some 100 proof or whatever, of like White Lightning or something, she could have just 1 or 2 of those at 100 pounds, and her BAC would be really high if she's killed really quickly from the time she consumes the alcohol.
So your blood alcohol level doesn't decrease after you die?
No, you're burning it off. Your body is metabolizing it.
Yeah, see, I don't know anything about this stuff. So here's what I'm wondering. So, okay, you've got her, she's found naked in the middle of the road. She has a 0.42 blood alcohol level. She has cocaine and Xanax in her system. Anything else? She has no clothes on.
She's bruising and she's naked.
Okay, and so it's not. They're not exactly sure. I don't have an exact date of last contact. Do you?
No, she's not gone super long.
I know. Her family, I believe maybe it's a day. So, like, she was last seen like one night, and then a day goes by, and then she's found that following morning. But I'm not entirely sure about that, and I don't want to. I don't want to say that that's fact, not knowing. But so she was wandering around. Her boyfriend had kicked her out. She had gone to her grandmother's, and she ate something at her grandmother's house, but her brother would not allow her to stay overnight. And so she was looking for a place to stay because her boyfriend they'd gotten into a fight and he had kicked her out and she had nowhere to go. And so there's talk that now the brother that she has is Mike Dubois.
Yeah.
Mike Dubois. And so after Whitney leaves, there's an allegation that she may have taken some of her grandmother's medication, which I assume would have some sort of, recreational drug value to her as far as, what she could take. It doesn't seem like it was found in her system, so I don't know. But so from there, she's wandering around. Now, she did not typically walk the streets. Again, they've alleged she was into sex work, but from my understanding, it's more of the party scene where it was a trade for drugs. But I thought she was having a rough time, one, finding anywhere to stay because she'd been kicked out of 2 places so far that night. And then she may or may not have taken some medication from her grandmother. If it did, I guess it would have had to have been Xanax.
Xanax, yeah.
And it was said that she would do cocaine, and she took the Xanax before she did the cocaine to ease the crash. Basically, that's what somebody said that was what she did.
Yeah.
She, was said to have gone to some of the locals there, saw her after she had left her grandmother's, or I guess that's her mother's house, not her grandmother. I'm sorry. It's confusing because her brother's so much older than her. So his mother and her mother, she was adopted. Now, she was in, I imagine somebody that gets kicked out of 2 places might be a little bit irritable, and they may not be getting along with people around them. It may be a sort of blanketed type fog over them. I'm just imagining. I have no idea. It doesn't seem like anybody that saw her that night actually has a coherent enough memory of it to say one way or the other.
Yeah, so the idea is I think you were getting at what's the date of last contact for her?
That's what I was wondering. Well, I know that this is what happened when she was last seen.
Yeah, so depending on which account you read, what you're describing was either, because it boils down to what does 2 a.m. on the 11th mean? Because one person means it like they're talking about the 11th, the day the 11th ends, and then 2 a.m. rolled around and she was looking for drugs. And then one person seems to mean it was actually 2 a.m. on the 11th as opposed to 2 a.m. on the 12th. Does that make sense? It's like
Yeah, and that makes a big difference because one of the things that is, part of Whitney's case is that she was decomposed. And that's really strange, given the small amount of time that went by, even if it is the longer of the 2 times. Her body was found on May the 12th around 7:30 a.m. was when a call was made. There's speculation that it was seen earlier or what have you, but she was found on a rural road about 3 miles southeast of Jennings, and between Louisiana Highway 102 and Louisiana Highway 90. It wasn't a heavily traveled area, but it wasn't, the middle of nowhere either. So, question is, how long was she out on the dirt road before she was found? Was it 4 hours or 5 hours, or was it a day and 5 hours? And the speculation was that a local person had let her stay with them when she had been kicked out and was looking for somewhere to stay, and that she had been put in a barrel before her body was dumped, essentially. And that's where I was getting with that. Would it have been possible for blood alcohol level to be increased through some sort of seepage if she was put in a container. Like, it's almost like what you would do when you're pickling something.
Well, so
I don't personally think that it would. I was just curious as to if that could have, because I find it really strange that the sisters were like, she didn't drink, because I mean, honestly, at this point, it didn't really matter. But it's also not something that could be like nefariously done because of the nature of alcohol.
Oh, you mean somebody like doing something weird, like stabbing someone with a syringe full of...
Well, they made it, when the sisters were talking about the fact that she didn't drink, and it was really strange that her blood alcohol level was so high, they made it seem like that was like a red flag, right? Except I can't get a red flag off of that. I can't figure out what the red flag would be, except that maybe she was ticked off that night and, alcohol was available.
Well, so as we go through this case and we sort of start talking about other people's theories, one of them does involve a barrel of chemicals with formaldehyde in it. So formaldehyde's a different thing. Like, you would be dealing with a methanol, but like that might I don't know.
That's this case.
I know that, but I'm saying that's not that's other people's theories as we...
Right. It is not, it's just speculation. There's absolutely nothing.
Proof of it.
There's no evidence indicating that actually happened. I was just curious. I can't quite put together, why it would be relevant that she didn't drink and her blood alcohol was so high, and what did they mean by that? Like, for example, if they had said, well, she never did cocaine, right? I mean, that would be like, oh, well, she must have thought she was doing something else and accidentally ingested cocaine. I don't know. It's just, to me, it doesn't make sense for them to want the alcohol to not be a thing.
The formaldehyde they're talking about, like the chemicals they're talking about, there's an explanation we'll get into later where they were making wets, which are essentially, it's marijuana that's been dipped in formaldehyde. But this is a visual I have, and I don't know if you want it in your head, but so everything that ethanol poisoning does, methanol poisoning can look similar to that. And one of the thoughts I had was, if these guys are as genius as I think they are, and I'm talking about not a serial killer, this is just collectively the drug culture in this area. If they dunked a woman, if they thought a woman was dead, they thought she had overdosed, they thought something was wrong with her, and she had legit just had an extra Xanax and too much Coke and had passed out, and they stuck her body in a barrel full of random chemicals that they were using for other things, thinking they were going to have to get rid of her, and they didn't want to be linked to this other stuff, and she was alive, she could very quickly end up with a high blood alcohol concentrate or a body chemistry that read like a high blood alcohol concentrate from having been dunked in this barrel and just kept
So
in
you
this
think
barrel.
that is a possibility then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is going to be a through thread. I don't think this is going to be a common thing among these cases. But yeah, I absolutely believe that one. So, I have to give away a little bit of my theory here. So I'm going to go ahead and say it. The Jeff Davis 8 is not a serial killer for me. And that's not been said in what we're releasing to this point. But it's not. I think that your theory on how this all happened, we're sort of unfolding as we go, will make the most sense. But how I could picture that happening, I'm not saying that's what happened to Whitney, but how I could picture it is, we'll call them idiot number 1, idiot number 2, and idiot number 3. Idiot number 1 is doing that thing that you've described at this point where he has some drugs and he wants to bang a girl, and Whitney ends up coming and looking for drugs. So he offers to share the drugs if he can have sex with Whitney. What he doesn't know is that maybe the rumor was true and Whitney took a couple Xanax because she didn't think she was going to find drugs, and now she's found drugs, so she'll just take those too. So they get to whatever happens, and he thinks that he has a dead girl in his band, but in his bed or his house or wherever they are. And, as described by his moniker, idiot number one thinks that he is now on the hook because he's killed this girl. So idiot number one has a friend that is named idiot number two. And he comes over and he doesn't check her pulse or anything like that. He just looks at her, and idiot number one says she's dead. So he says, oh yeah, she's dead. So what are we going to do with her? And they said, well, idiot number three has a barrel with some stuff in it that'll make a body disappear. So they put the body in the barrel. And then some other guy who we'll call genius number one shows up and says, bodies don't you have to do things for a body to that body's just going to sit in that barrel and be preserved like a pickle in a jar.
Right, because formaldehyde preserves things, right?
Right, and so idiot number one is gone. He went home thinking that idiot number two and idiot number three had saved his hide. Idiot number two is passed out now because he's been sniffing formaldehyde all night from this barrel he has no idea how to deal with. And idiot number three is listening to genius number one. He says, well, I guess we got to drive and do something with the body then. He said, yeah, you need it. Well, first of all, you need to take it out of that barrel. And second of all, let it dry out a little while or something. And whatever you do, don't put it in water. It'll kill all the critters. So then people will know that something has happened. And that guy says, so we can't put it in the water. Then what do? We've got to dig a hole. He says, no, just leave it somewhere. Genius number one leaves. And idiot number three is now left with this body that he had to pull out of the barrel. So he drives down the road and pushes the body out of the truck and leaves it in the road. That's how I think this goes down.
Do you think so? With the formaldehyde, would a autopsy show that it had been in formaldehyde?
I don't.
It seems to me like it would.
I don't know. Not if he let it. So I guess my theory there sort of presumes that she disappeared on the 10th or the 11th. She disappeared on the 10th or the 11th. She's found on the 12th. So this all has to happen in a number of hours, and maybe it did. Maybe she wasn't there as long as it would have taken.
The formaldehyde being in her, if she was legit put in formaldehyde, okay, how did she start decomposing so fast?
Well, where did you read that she was decomposed? Show me that so I can understand it, because I'm having a little trouble following that. Her cause of death was undetermined, so I see how you could make that leap.
This is what I saw. All we know is that she was found naked on a dirt road, decomposed. That's what I found.
I thought it said decomposing, which would happen.
Well, that was somebody saying that.
So then we have a while after Whitney before we have another victim, and this victim's name is Muggy Brown. Muggy Brown's date of death is estimated to be May 27th of 2008, and her body is found on May 29th, 2008. And the location of her body was east of Highway 102 off of Rocca Road. Now, Muggy is dressed in a peach. She's wearing a peach tank top, and then she has blue denim shorts that have a white discoloration on the left hip. She's wearing a purple bra, purple panties, and an ankle bracelet with colored beads. And she has a very low blood alcohol level. It's just a 0.04. And she has cocaine in her system. Now, on Muggy's body, we have multiple incised wounds to the head and the neck, 3 cuts behind the right ear, and approximately 7 cuts across the front of the neck. There's no evidence of any significant other injuries or natural disease causing any of this. The next victim is, nobody knows when she died, but she's found on September 11th of 2008, and there are some theories. This is Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno. Her body is found September 11th, 2008, which is a Thursday, off of LaCour Road, which is a mile south of Highway 1126. Now, with her body, there's no clothing and there's no jewelry. Her toxicology is unknown, and the findings were that she was a homicide victim. Our next to last victim, her date of death is estimated to have been November 4th of 2008, and her body was found on Saturday, November 15th, 2008. And this is Brittany Gary. She was found on Keystone Road off of, which is south of Highway 1126. She had no clothing, but she did have a gray beaded bracelet on her right ankle, and she did have toxicology done. Her toxicology showed that her blood alcohol level was 0.03 and that she had cocaine in her system. Her manner of death, though, is a little different in that they believe she was asphyxiated, which is essentially strangled. And she had mixed drug intoxication, but no evidence of other significant injuries or disease. And the last victim of the Jeff Davis 8 is Nicole Guillory. Nicole Guillory, her date of death is estimated to have been August the 17th of 2009. And the date her body was found was Wednesday, August 19th, 2009. Her body was found off of I-10 between mile markers 73 and 74. That would be Acadia Parish. Now, she was partially clothed. In her toxicology, this is done by a different coroner, so it reads a little different paperwork-wise. It just found evidence of alcohol, tramadol, and cocaine in her system. The manner of death for her was also asphyxia or strangulation. She had postmortem cuts on the left side of her face and the left eyebrow and left clavicle. She had mixed drug intoxication like the others and possible sperm in her vagina. Now, tramadol and alcohol are interesting. So tramadol it's a pain medication. Some people might know it as Ultram. It acts as a very similarly to an opioid with the central nervous system, but there can be some, all of these drugs, they can be very toxic and can cause major problems health-wise for a person when they're combined with other substances. But tramadol has an especially with alcohol warning, which is sort of unique. I really just wanted a piece where it's just us going through saying like who they are and sort of what we know about their deaths.
We did sort of get off on a tangent on Whitney, I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, the tangents are understandable in this case. Of the 8, we have 2, 3, 4... We have 4 undetermined manners of death. We have 1 homicide with a lot of cuts early on. That's Ernestine. We have 2 asphyxiations with Nicole and Brittany. And then we have another homicide with Muggy. But Muggy's is weird because some of her cuts and stuff might be post-mortem. Overall, this is just sort of a bucket of what happened to these girls, which is where we're headed with this. Now, you spent a little bit of time on a tangent with Whitney. Is there any other tangent that stands out?
Not especially. I mostly feel like a lot of what's going to end up being the result or the conclusion of what is collectively known as the Jeff Davis 8 is recognizing the differences between the different victims. And, in that, I mean, for one thing, the time that passed. The first 2 victims are within a month of each other in 2005. The second 2 are in 2007, right? The fact that 2 of the victims they had their throats slashed. And the first 3 victims, they were all in some form of water, with the 4th victim not in the water. She was just dumped in the middle of a road. And while it is, and I feel like I may have said this before, so I might be repeating myself, but while, yes, there are 8 young women who have died and their deaths remain unsolved, there's not a whole lot of similarities there. As far as, like, the victims were sort of similar, but you're going from one end of the spectrum to the other as far as, like, a body being clothed in the water and then a body being naked in the middle of a dirt road.
I understand why some of the law enforcement people were sort of like, this is not a serial killer. And then, maybe there's some common offenders here. I started, the more I dig into these cases and the more I talk to you about them, I have come to the conclusion that the reason that they've never caught the serial killer of the Jeff Davis 8, or the Jennings 8, depending on where you're coming from, is because there wasn't a serial killer. And what happened in Jennings, Louisiana between 2005 and 2000, I think the last case is 2009, is so much more complicated than that. And that's really the heart of where we're headed with these episodes is they have a really big bucket of unsolved murders in this area. And it's not just the Jeff Davis 8. And the Jeff Davis 8, no matter how we look at it, it's not any one person's fault. Does that make sense when I say fault?
Yeah.
Because you went through, and I'm going to say this, and then you correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll just re-say it. You have a pretty good idea of what happened to each one of these girls, at least from the perspective of where they fit into this equation, don't you?
I guess. I mean, obviously, it's just my opinion, but there's nothing overtly mysterious or, in some cases, criminal necessarily. I don't think, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I feel like it's like you're missing the forest for the trees, sort of. And I do have a pretty good idea just based on the circumstances that are available, because only so many things could happen. I mean, I had you painfully go through the different levels of, alcohol, specifically to show, like, if that was consumed by anyone, they could very well end up in the middle of the road naked. And there was never any indication she had been hit by a car, right?
Okay, but if she really was drinking that much, and say she just went on a bender and she's wandering around naked, it doesn't take a car to kill her at that point.
No, you're right. She could have just fallen down. But, like, the thought from there is, like, well, how'd she get out there?
You would be surprised what drunk people can do.
Well, I actually wouldn't be surprised. I'm just saying, like, the simplest explanation here. And you got to keep in mind, every single one of these, the Jeff Davis 8 girls that died, their deaths were painfully tragic. Okay.
Absolutely. These people dying left families behind.
They left small children, and they resonated through the community. And the fact that there is this open end of, unresolved tension, to explain what happened to them, nobody wants to accept the simplest answer, because it's so tragic and you want there to be more to it. And, my opinions of some of the victims are that they overdosed and they were dumped, which sucks, but, it shouldn't have happened to them. It was terrible. But I do think in a situation where you're partying, which from what I understand means doing drugs, basically, and you're high, I can absolutely see where when one high person overdoses and appears to be dead, which they may be dead or dying, I can see where high people don't know how to deal with that and freak out. There's a lot of information. It's almost like the people in this town, they either talk about it a lot or they don't want to say anything at all. So you've got two ends of the spectrum. But it's been, like, they say, I couldn't, like, for example, the man who found Whitney in the middle of the road, he saw her and went home and dumped his drugs before he came back to call the police. And
he didn't want to get in trouble.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying, as far that whole mentality, it spills over into the fact that they would, dump somebody who they were partying with that OD'd because they don't want to get in trouble.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabbratiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabbratiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
This is us starting to take a look at the Jeff Davis 8 as we kind of move through the fall episodes. Other people that have covered this, it's been covered pretty well. We liked this case to look at because it was tied into other Louisiana stuff that we were sort of digging up on our own. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If not, we're going to spend a few more episodes on it. And then I think around Thanksgiving there'll be some different type of episodes. And, we're kind of cruising towards the holiday wrap-up. But if you haven't, you should check out the movie Red Notice on Netflix, too. I was very excited to see myself on the big screen, and that it was a huge deal.
Black and white, we exist between the lines. spark like light in a match, and it's trying to catch like falling so fast, chemicals react. The tide is high, taking me back, and I'm never the same. I'm feeling at home when I'm calling your name. We're carrying on when it's starting to change. The tide